I'm too childlike to have the microphone at that level. So this is the scene that sent Bond fans into a spin. It's James Bond drinking a Heineken beer. Fans were really pissed off. They claimed that Bond would never have chosen to drink a Heineken, even though the label does actually state that it's a premium lager. It seemed that everyone just wanted to know where his drink of choice, the vodka martini, shaken, not stirred, had gone. Some claimed that the 007 franchise had sold out the Bond identity for advertising revenue. But it's interesting that a fictional character like James Bond, who's been portrayed in 23 different films by 6 actors, could promote these sorts of claims in the first place. How can anyone claim that there is one Bond identity? I mean, not only has the passage of time treated him kind of suspiciously, but he's also an MI6 agent, so his whole deal is to not really let people know who he truly is. Yet Bond's new drinking habits certainly provoked cries of some sort of infidelity to an identity. And Heineken reportedly paid $45 million for its Skyfall endorsements. However, this very brief scene here is actually the only scene in the film where he's pictured with the bottle. And it's shorter than a scene in which he drinks a martini. There is another agent who is seen in the film drinking a Heineken, but that's it. So it's $45 million. And James Bond has traditionally been an agent with expensive taste. He always gets his man, and of course the girl, all while retaining a particularly British sense of composure. So perhaps seeing him enjoy a beverage that retails at £8 for a 12-pack at Tesco's was indeed a portrayal. When we think Bond, we think the tuxedos, the vodka martini, the Aston Martin, and endless gadgets. Anything that this guy touches isn't just cool, but it's also classy, which of course has lent the franchise to be an excellent candidate for product placement. In addition to Heineken, in Skyfall we see Land Rover, Audi, Vita Beetles, Range Rover, Jaguar, Aston Martin, Honda, Coke Zero, Bollinger Champagne, Macallan Whiskey, Virgin Atlantic, Tom Ford Clothing, Cardin Mundi playing cards, Omega watches, Rossi Crystal jewellery, and Sony phones and laptops. The last one here is kind of unsurprising, given that Sony owns Columbia Pictures. In addition to these on-screen product placements, there was also an extensive list of film tie-in merchandising. My favourite of this was the Visit Britain tourism campaign, Live Like Bond, as it includes the slogan, "Bond is great, Britain." Which, if you really think about it, and you've seen Skyfall, does not really make it a very stable place to visit. So this sort of endorsement of commercial brands and films perhaps should not come as a surprise to us, because film is a commercial product as well as an art form, in that films are designed to be consumed by an audience. And they're kind of expensive products to make. So Skyfall's budget is estimated to have been around $150 million, which was actually down from the previous Bond film, Quantum of Solace, which reportedly cost $200 million. Unlike other forms of commercial media, like commercial broadcast television in the traditional sense, there are no designated ad breaks in films. And actually, with the increased rate of downloading and DVR devices, we can probably put television in that sort of bracket as well. So if productions wish to subsidise their budget with advertising revenue, this now must be done within the content itself, even if it's done ironically, as in the case of Wayne's World, or more recently, 30 Rock. Displaying products and brands within the content of a production has occurred since the early years of cinema. The Garage, which is from 1920, was one of the first films cited and criticised for its use of product placement of Red Crown gasoline. But paid product placement, as we know it today, became a big business in its own right in the 1980s. You may recall that in Steven Spielberg's 1982 film E.T., the magical connection between E.T. and Elliot occurs thanks to the irresistible nature of Reese's Pieces. There's Elliot being rather creepy and being a stranger with candy. Then later that decade, Marty McFly was offered a rare insight into how some companies, namely AT&T, Nike, Pepsi, and Texaco, would fare in the future. And this was then shared with audiences. Somewhat amusingly, the future in this film is 2015. But, really, they did get some stuff right. So E.T. and Back to the Future 2 demonstrate what we now expect from product placement. So products or brands being integrated into a film's narrative for profit. Reese's Pieces sales did increase by 65% in the 3 months following the release of E.T. And I'm sure Mars, who were actually offered this slot and they rejected it for M&Ms, were kind of kicking themselves when they found that out. So product placement is now a multi-million-dollar industry. A study that was conducted in the 1990s found that product placement is almost twice as effective as traditional advertising in terms of viewers being able to recall products. So when Lark paid $350,000 to have James Bond smoke their cigarettes in the kind of aptly named License to Kill, they would have been aware that the product would not only be reaching a pretty large audience, but it would be seen and remembered in a certain light, which then corresponds with the Bond image. Product placement also has the benefit of being an extended advertising campaign, as unlike traditional advertising, once that fee has been paid, it is then seemingly in the film or production for good. So whenever it is then rescreened on television, or if it's made available for home entertainment in a home entertainment format, people see that product all over again. But contemporary audiences are extremely aware of product placement as being a commercial tactic, and as such, it is readily recognised and criticised. But not all product placement is necessarily as expensive as Heineken Skyfall endorsements. In some cases, the placement takes the form of prop placement. So this is when, say, you have a volleyball that is required for the narrative of a film, and a company pays for that volleyball in exchange for exposure in the final cut, but does not pay any advertising beyond this. Also, the way that products feature in the films differs. So creative product placement is when a product is shown in the background of a shot, while on-set product placement is when the product is displayed more prominently or is mentioned or used by one of the central characters. It's usually this second type that gets our conscious attention and is therefore more widely criticised. Sometimes this criticism occurs because the way a product is mentioned or used does not reflect natural speech or action. So for instance, in Wall Street, when Martin Sheen's character enthusiastically orders a drink for Charlie Sheen by yelling, "Bring a Molson Light for this kid," he projects the brand name as though it is interchangeable with the term beer. This sort of cringe-worthy product placement is even more noticeable in the television show Gossip Girl. The show is sponsored by Vitamin Water. It does seem odd that the entire population of this Upper East Side New York society drinks only alcohol and this brightly coloured sugared water, but they do, and they also talk about it a lot. Vitamin Water runs episode-long design competitions and sponsors parties in the Hamptons where the bottles are lined up on the counter like little rainbows, and then characters actually order Vitamin Water by name even though there is literally nothing but Vitamin Water on offer at the party. In some episode, Vitamin Water actually receives as much screen time as a guest actor or recurring minor character. But Gossip Girl is a haven for product placement. In every episode, there are designer fashion labels, high-end restaurants, expensive drinks, and the like, mentioned by brand name, and they're often directly related to the plot of that episode. This use of product placement is necessary for the show because, like Bond's supposedly expensive taste, the characters are actually determined by their upper-class elitism. So when designers like Diane von Furstenberg or Vera Wang are named, this is done both artistically because it gives the show some sort of sense of familiarity, and also for commercial purposes because by mentioning these brands, it notes them as being desirable to the audience. Vitamin Water, on the other hand, does not add to the elitism of these characters and therefore draws attention to itself as actually being advertising. So productions that do not use real brands allow and sometimes also encourage the audience to realise the fictional nature of what they're watching. Repo Man's use of generic branding is jarring because we expect to see the shelves of a supermarket lined with recognisable competing advertising. And Quentin Tarantino uses the same fictional brands in all of his films to kind of create a Tarantino world. But neither Tarantino nor films like Repo Man are actually attempting at complete naturalism. And so they sort of invert the audience's brand expectations in order to achieve a different aesthetic. But as I mentioned, Gossip Girl does require real brands to drive their episode plots and create a sense of realism. But they also market their characters as though they exist in our real world. In one episode, the power couple Bart and Lily Bass host a housewarming party. This event was to be covered in the show by reporters of the magazine InStyle. But then InStyle magazine actually did a report on the event and worded it as though it had actually taken place. Of course, there were lots of handy hints on how you could get his or her style and links to retailers that would actually sell you these items. But what I found really bizarre was that they used the tagline, "We were there." Well, you know what? So were 2.48 million other US broadcast viewers, not to mention those who download the show. So perhaps this awkward example of product placement synergy was trying just a little bit too hard. But what Gossip Girl's narrative-based product placement does highlight is the importance of an illusion of reality. The show would not have the same following if the clothes worn were not made by real designers. And willingly or not, we think in brands to some degree, and companies do know this. You think about the Pepsi challenge. The whole premise of that campaign was to convert people who thought of themselves as aligned with one sugary effervescent brown liquid to their sugary effervescent brown liquid. It was about changing a person's brand alliances. I swear allegiance to Coke, although I realise it's damn near the exact same thing as Pepsi. I also prefer Revlon to Maybelline, not only because, it does give me flawless skin for hours, but because Maybelline used the slogan, maybe she's born with it, maybe it's Maybelline. And I find the idea that anyone is wondering whether or not these girls were actually born with it absolutely horrifying. We read in brands because it makes sense to us. In fact, the research has shown that we do this voluntarily. Audiences infer product placement even where there is none. For instance, when a hamburger is shown in a film, viewers often later report having witnessed product placement for McDonald's or Burger King in accordance with the prominence of that particular brand in their everyday lives. The presence of an unidentified cola is often also acknowledged as being Coca-Cola. Of course, advertisers are aware that for product placement to be successful, the audience must be able to actually access that product. So in the film Demolition Man, Taco Bell was plugged as being the only fast food joint to survive in the year 2032. However, at the time of release, there were very few Taco Bell outlets outside of the US, so the film was re-edited and parts were re-recorded to replace Taco Bell with restaurants that an audience could actually visit. So German audiences of the same film saw Pizza Hut instead. This makes sense in two ways, because it works better for the advertisers in terms of potential profits, and also, as the research showed, the audience feels more connected to the narrative because they recognize the brands as being the same as those present in their real lives. So I guess we should then return to Mr. Bond and his Heineken. Now, it's true, that's not a martini, but it's also true it's not the first time that Bond has been seen drinking a beer. In fact, in addition to the many other beverages he's enjoyed over his time, but in the very first film, Dr. No, he ordered himself a Red Stripe. It was claimed in this situation that that was acceptable because he was in a Jamaican scene, and as a spy, he didn't really want to stand out. But I don't see how that differs greatly from his very brief consumption of a Heineken. I mean, Bond here, he's in Turkey or a neighbouring land in what looks to be a very warm climate. He's in bed with his lover, who's a very beautiful woman. Given this and the relative comfort of both, it's safe to assume that in recent times, Bond's probably been exerting some degree of physical activity, and he might be a little bit thirsty. Drinking a beer while reclined in bed with a lover seems far more realistic than trying to prop up a martini in exactly the same situation. So the scene is realistic, however, perhaps that's precisely the issue. Bond is not like most characters. Remember, he's Great Britain. He's a figure who's almost like a superhero. He's in a tuxedo, but he doesn't have superpowers, or so we're led to believe, despite his ability to seemingly deflect death even in the most extreme situations. Perhaps because of the unknowable quality of one single Bond, the audience clings to these consumer choices as though they are themselves character traits. So Bond has had and will continue to enjoy a rich relationship with product placement, and that's fine, but if they don't want to piss off the fans, it's probably best to keep these products glamorous, and for the love of God, please never threaten the martini.
One medium dry vodka martini, mixed like you said, sir, and not stirred.
Thank you.
Anything else, sir?
No, that's all.
Dry martini, lemon peel, shaken, not stirred.
Vodka?
Of course.
Can I do something for you, Mr. Bond?
Just a drink. A martini, shaken, not stirred.
Should I have the vodka martini sent up?
Shaken, not stirred.
Of course.
The lady'll have a Bacardi on the rocks.
For the gentleman, vodka martini, shaken, not stirred. Vodka martini, shaken, not stirred.
Vodka martini, shaken, not stirred. Vodka martini, shaken, not stirred.
Mr. Zukovsky will be delighted to see you.
Vodka martini. Plenty of ice, if you can spare it.
Dry martini.
Oui, monsieur.
Wait.
3 measures of Gordon's, 1 of vodka, half a measure of quina lily. Shake it over ice and then add a thin slice of lemon peel. Vodka martini.
Shaken, not stirred.
Do I look like I give a damn?